Hi, my name is Heather Burrell, and I am from the Education Department, and I am here to talk to you today about communication and de-escalation. Basically, the goal is we're going to be preparing for the unexpected. So the first thing I want to show you is a video. This video is actually the ER at Cache Valley Hospital in Logan, Utah, and I want you just to watch it. We're going to have it on mute, and I want you just to watch this video and just use your senses to decide if you think this day is going as planned. So you see a gentleman walking into the office. He's going to come up to the secretary's desk, and he actually asks to see a specific provider. And again, just watching what you see happening. See if this is normal behavior. And as you can see, a firearm has been pulled from his pocket. And again, just continue to watch his behavior. Things that you'll probably be noticing are the shifting, his eyebrows are raised, he's anxious, he's looking at the doorways. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end that video here. And this is an example of a crisis. This is a mental health crisis that this gentleman had gone through. Backstory on this basically was that he had a pain medication addiction, and he was in a desperate situation, and obviously this got to a point where he felt like this is the best answer he could get. And so we don't expect that this is going to happen, but we want you to be prepared to know what we would do if something like that were to happen. So this next slide here is the crisis cycle, and this is what every single person goes through. This is everybody in their everyday life, as well as those that may be having a mental health disorder or other problems. And basically, if you'll just look through it, you can see that we've got a baseline level, and that baseline is when everything is in control, everything's happy. Something usually will happen to trigger a little uptick in that crisis cycle. Our goal is to, of course, always, it would be great to never have anybody get upset, but our goal is to identify quickly if we see a little uptick. If somebody is triggered and we see that there's a little uptick, our goal is to identify that and quickly try to do what we can to de-escalate it. And you can see from that slide, if we can de-escalate quickly right after that trigger, we don't actually have very far to get back to that baseline. However, if we miss that, they will go on to the next level, which is escalation. And again, we don't want them to get to that point, but if we miss the trigger and we get to the escalation part, our goal is to identify that, try to do what we can to calm that down. If we miss that, we're going to go to a crisis where there will actually be a natural peak depending on the circumstances. There will become a peak of the level of what they do. And then there will be a come down and potentially a crash. So we're going to go into those more in depth. So first is the baseline. Everything is in control. Everybody's happy. It couldn't be a better day in anybody's life than baseline. So in culture, I've got this example of this wonderful couple that is attending an event. It looks like it's a big event. They look happy, they look prepared, it looks like the day is going to be wonderful. And so this is a good example of baseline where we look at something and we think, wow, they're doing great. Everybody's happy, everybody's in control. So I want to talk a little bit about communication. So only 7% of communication is actually the words that we say. So in that video I showed you first with the gentleman at the ER entrance, I did mute that so you were not able to actually hear the words that were being said. You also were not able to hear the verbal cues. So you were only able to get information off of that nonverbal communication. Yet, with that nonverbal communication, you were able to watch his body language, his mannerisms, obviously the gun being pulled, all of that information was able to be expressed to you very clearly. And so as a reminder, I want you to watch and look for verbal cues, nonverbal cues, and be aware and try to get that information. But also it's really important to make sure that you're watching your communication and your nonverbal cues so that you are portraying the message that you want to have. Also remember, listening is a verb. So when people are communicating with you, make sure that you are making eye contact, answer questions, restate back what you heard, make sure that you're understanding correctly, and let them know that you're actively listening and being a part of that. It's also very important to be professional and to have positive interactions. Be authentic in your style. People will be able to see if you're being authentic, and they're going to be able to feel that. I also want to make sure that we stress, I've got on here to be cool as a cucumber. Sometimes the hospital is the best day of many people's lives, and other times coming to the hospital can be the very worst times. So there might be an extra level of stress from coworkers, from patients, from visitors, from even providers. And so there might be a time that they take their frustrations out on you, even though you didn't do anything. I just ask that you just try to not react, try to just let that roll off, and just be patient and calm with those kind of things. Remember that communication is often how we say something, not necessarily what we say. So, depending on the inflection on your voice, you can actually change the whole content of what you're saying. So here are a couple examples. You can read here, I didn't say you were stupid. So depending on which word we inflect on, we can actually change the entire content of what was communicated here. So make sure that you're being consistent and aware of any inflections that you may have. So you can see through there, that's just an example of some of the different words that we could inflect on and what that would do to alter the meaning of that phrase. When I say to you, what are some signs of increased agitation? I want you to just think in your mind, and if you were to visualize a cartoon character of agitation, what are some of the characteristics that you would see? So this person may be an example of what you imagine with somebody who is agitated. So things that you might notice in somebody that's agitated, maybe a raised voice, clenched fists, frowning, scowling, tight jaw, shaking, trembling, pacing. You actually saw a lot of those characteristics in that first video that I showed you. Now, when I show these slides, there's no right or wrong answer. I want you just to think to yourself when you look at this woman in this slide, what are some things that she may be feeling? What information are you getting from her? Oftentimes the answers are overwhelmed, sad, stressed. Those are common things that I hear. This next slide here, again, no right or wrong answers. When you look at this person, what's the information you're receiving? Many times you get distraught, sad, overwhelmed. And again, you're going to be using your own personal experiences to determine what you feel like is happening in these. The third individual I have, again, just using your instincts and your experiences, when you see this person, what are the communication information that you're receiving? Commonly, I get suspicious, paranoid. Some look at that gentleman and say excited, anticipating something. So again, depending on your experiences and your trainings, you might see these things differently. So typically I would then say to somebody, again, using your instincts, if I were to tell you to go help one of these people, is there somebody that you'd want to go help? Now, typically when I ask this question in a class, I will usually get people that will refer to one of the ladies and say that they would feel comfortable talking to one of the ladies. A lot of others are uncomfortable approaching the man looking out the window. Now, again, depending on your circumstances and what you've been trained to do, somebody might look at him and go, hey, I think I could help him. And others might look at him and say, I feel uncomfortable doing that. And I just want to remind you, trust your instincts. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, that maybe there's a safety concern, I want you to listen to those instincts. If you look at the woman that has the tear about to drip off of her chin, and you know there's a box of tissues nearby and you could help and just give her a smile and offer her a tissue, that might be all that she needs to be able to feel better and to feel cared about. Now, if you saw something happening that made you feel uncomfortable, I don't necessarily think that you need to go jump in and get involved if that's not part of your training or your expertise. However, I don't want you to ignore it. So for example, let's say that you're just heading home and it's late at night and you're in the parking lot and you see somebody going by and checking the doorknobs of all the cars in the parking lot. I don't necessarily want you to go and interact and confront somebody, but contact somebody at the hospital. We do have security, we have house supervisors, and you could just contact security and say, hey, I noticed something out in the parking lot. And again, it may be nothing. It may be somebody that can't find their car, or it could be something suspicious. So again, if you see something and your instinct says that sounds like that feels like trouble, don't hesitate to get involved in involving security with those kind of things. Okay, so we're back to that crisis cycle. And I want to talk to you about trigger. So trigger, as you can see, is that first little uptick in some agitation. So if you see somebody in a triggered state that they're starting to kind of move up their frustration level, you try to stay calm, try to help what you can, answer directly, do what you can to try to make the situation better, but I'm always going to remind you that your safety is number one. So make sure that you are aware where your exit is, and make sure that you are always closer to the exit than the person that is beginning to get agitated. So here is my slide for trigger. So as you can see in this picture, we've got that same couple that we saw at baseline, super happy, everything looks wonderful. You can see that the gentleman is happy and entertained by what's being said. And then something changes, and you see that someone is not happy with something that was just said. Now, this is going to start that trigger, that little trigger uptick of crisis for the husband in this situation. Now, when we talk about de-escalation, if she had looked over and saw that he had noticed that she was upset, and she had said something like, oh, honey, it's okay. It's okay. I'm okay. That might have been the end of it. We may not have ever even seen anything else happen, but they wouldn't be in my slideshow if that's the case. So we're going to go ahead and go on and talk about escalation. So escalation is where they've triggered, we've started that uptick, and instead of it calming down and getting back to that baseline quickly, it's ramping up and it's getting a little bit worse. So if you see that happening, increase the distance between you and that person that is becoming more and more agitated. Make sure you're aware of where your exits are. Trust your instincts. If it seems like it's not a safe situation, get out of there. So here is my example of escalation. So you can see that this gentleman is upset. He was triggered, and he is upset and heading to go have some communication level with the presenter. Now, in the background, you can actually see that there are some film professionals there, some cameramen and those kind of things. I don't know if this would have helped, but potentially if one of those camera crew or one of the other production crew had jumped up and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, I can't have you up here, maybe they could have calmed him down. Or if one of his peers that cared for him and knew him had jumped up and said, Mr. Smith, hey, let's come over here. I know that makes you mad. But it's important to watch for opportunities for de-escalation. And if we don't get to that de-escalation, something bad may happen. As a note, I want to say that if somebody is agitated and escalating and angrily walking towards you, the position of this presenter is the position I don't want you standing in. Don't put your hands behind your back. Don't jut your head ever so slightly forward. You're basically in a very vulnerable position that if that person were to get angry, and here is my slide of anger, you might get some kind of altercation. And you can see that in the posture of the presenter, he did not have his arms out. He was not prepared for what happened. And because of that, he was not able to defend himself. He was not able to back up and get out of the way. And then even after the assault, you can see that Mr. Smith is still very agitated. It actually takes him a long time to come down off of that level of agitation. And I would say when we talk about the crisis cycle and there's that come down and the cool down point and then a recovery stage, I would say that Mr. Smith is probably still recovering from the events that happened there. And I'm sure that the presenter and some of the other people that were there are feeling that they are still trying to recover from that. So as just a final reminder, I just ask that you make sure that you're aware of safety. Make sure you're aware of your positioning, your posture. Make sure that you keep the individual in your view. Don't turn your back on them. And make sure that safety is your number one, regardless of what you're doing and the different areas that you might be going into. Know your exits. Know how to get out of there. And always have that in the back of your mind that safety is number one. Thanks.